You are also witnessing images, some of which we showed you earlier, of members of Congress and lawmakers huddled on their knees, some praying, some with gas masks over their head, waiting, huddling as the doors were breached or almost breached in the House and Senate chambers, which no doubt provoked what I think was one of the most powerful interviews that I've ever been engaged in with the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, who condemned the comments of Rudy Giuliani earlier today, when Rudy Giuliani, once America's mayor, who incited this crowd earlier by saying it's time to have trial by combat. Those words were clearly ingested, digested, and have now
been acted upon to desecrate the Capitol, to seek to occupy it, and to commit criminal acts in the name of patriotism. That's what this is about. People who are, as you said, Nora, imbued with this idea that there is something larger they're fighting for, when they are acting in the smallest possible way, a criminal way, to attack the Capitol, occupy it, and violate federal law in full public view, in pursuit of something they consider to be lofty. The things that you pursue are lofty. The Constitution, the rule of law, what the American Republic stands for. That which you are doing desecrates it in full public view.
Mm-hmm. And as we've been reporting, the National Guard, a request for additional National Guard have been approved by the Pentagon, by a request by the D.C. mayor. Ed's reported that the National Guard from Virginia and Maryland's governors, state police, have been activated. Also, the FBI getting involved.
But to Ed's point, it would be beneficial for all concerned if they were to arrive before nightfall.
Yeah, and there's already some conversation underway about how exactly you begin to restore order and ensure the safety of members of Congress so that they can, at some point, whether it's today or tomorrow, reconvene to hold this extraordinary session that was already supposed to be held. Frankly, at this point, 4 o'clock Eastern would have been 3 hours into the proceedings. They probably would have just been reconvening after the 2 hours of debate over the challenge to the state of Arizona's results, and would have been moving on through the alphabet, eventually getting to Georgia. Expected to be the next one.
Once again, Trump, the current president of the United States, being coaxed by leaders, aides to address the nation. Ben Tracy at the White House reporting he's seen a camera being set up. No clear sign yet that we may hear from the president. The president-elect, Joe Biden, is about to address the nation before the current president.
And to your point, Nora, you worked in the White House, I worked in the White House. The camera can be flipped on at any second. It can literally be put up any moment the President of the United States wants to address the country. It happens this fast. All it takes is intention. Oh, and a word the President used in a different context this morning, courage.
And as soon as President-elect Joe Biden comes to the podium, we will take his remarks live. It is just after 4 o'clock in the East, and what we've witnessed in the past several hours is
here he comes.
Thousands storm the U.S. Capitol. Here now, the President-elect Joe Biden.
I'm sorry, not just an inconvenience, but I'm sorry for the reason I've delayed coming out to speak to you. I initially was going to talk about the economy, but all of you have been watching what I've been watching. At this hour, our democracy is under an unprecedented assault, unlike anything we've seen in modern times. An assault on the citadel of liberty, the Capitol itself. An assault on the people's representatives and the Capitol Hill police, sworn to protect them, and the public servants who work at the heart of our republic. An assault on the rule of law like few times we've ever seen it. An assault on the most sacred of American undertakings, the doing of the people's business. Let me be very clear. The scenes of chaos at the Capitol do not reflect a true America. do not represent who we are. What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent. It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now. I call on this mob to pull back and allow the work of democracy to go forward. You've heard me say before in different contexts, the words of a president matter, no matter how good or bad that president is. At their best, the words of a president can inspire. At their worst, they can incite. And therefore, I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege, to storm the Capitol, to smash windows, to occupy offices, the floor of the United States Senate, rummaging through desks, on the Capitol, on the House of Representatives, threatening the safety of duly elected officials. It's not protest, it's insurrection. The world's watching. Like so many other Americans, I am genuinely shocked and saddened that our nation, so long the beacon of light and hope for democracy, has come to such a dark moment. Through war and strife, America's endured much. And we will endure here, and we will prevail again, and we'll prevail now. The work of the moment and the work of the next 4 years must be the restoration of democracy, of decency, honor, respect, the rule of law, just plain, simple decency. The renewal of the politics. It's about solving problems, looking out for one another, not stoking the flames of hate and chaos. As I said, America's about honor, decency, respect, tolerance. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. The certification of the Electoral College vote is supposed to be a sacred ritual, which we affirm. The purpose is to affirm the majesty of American democracy. But today's reminder, a painful one, that democracy is fragile, and to preserve it requires people of goodwill, leaders of the courage to stand up, who are devoted not to the pursuit of power, or the personal interest pursuits of their own selfish interest at any cost, but of the common good. Think what our children watching television are thinking. Think what the rest of the world is looking at. For nearly 2.5 centuries, we, the people, in search of a more perfect union, have kept our eyes on that common good. America is so much better than what we've seen today. Watching the scenes from the Capitol, I was reminded, as I prepared other speeches in the past, I was reminded of the words of Abraham Lincoln in his annual message to Congress, whose work has today been interrupted by chaos. Here's what Lincoln said. He said, "We shall nobly save or merely lose the last best hope on earth." Went on to say, "The way is plain, peaceful, generous, just. A way which, if followed, the world will forever applaud and God must forever bless." The way is plain here, too. That's who we are. It's the way of democracy, of respect, of decency, of honor. commitment as patriots to this nation. Notwithstanding what I saw today and we're seeing today, I remain optimistic about the incredible opportunities. There's never been anything we can't do when we do it together. And this god-awful display today is bringing home to every Republican and Democrat and Independent in the nation that we must step up. This is the United States of America. There's never, ever, 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 ever been a thing we've tried to do that we've done it together. We've not been able to do it. So, President Trump, step up. May God bless America. May God protect our troops and all those folks at the Capitol who are trying to preserve order. Thank you, and I'm sorry to have kept you waiting.
And they're the president-elect saying that at this hour, our democracy is under unprecedented assault, calling on President Trump to step up.
My safety, security, or the inauguration. I am not concerned. The American people are going to stand up and stand up now. Enough is enough is enough.
Enough is enough is enough.
Not concerned about the safety and security of the inauguration.
That message that enough is enough is enough is also being echoed by the Republican leader in the House, who we spoke with a short time ago, who said it's time to end this, but also a very strong, measured, tough statement by the president-elect urging President Trump to go on national television and demand an end to what he called the siege on Capitol Hill by a mob. In his words, he said, the words of a president matter, no matter how good or bad the president is. At their best, those words can inspire, and at their worst, they can incite.
He used another I word, insurrection. It's an important word. It's a meaningful word. It's one we haven't really had to think about in this country for a very long time, thankfully. We have to think about it now as we behold it, because that's what it is. You can call it nothing else. It is, in a small form, an act of insurrection.
But it is, as he pointed out, while is it an assault on the citadel of liberty, our United States Capitol, and an assault on the representatives of democracy, an assault on the public servants, an assault on the rule of law, and an assault on our sacred American democracy. He did note that this is a small group of people and does not represent our country as a whole.
And in fact, as he speaks this afternoon, we've seen governors across the country issue statements condemning this. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio.
Right.
Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. They're both Republicans.
Correct.
Larry Hogan a little while ago, Ralph Northam of Virginia. But I just sit here, guys, and watch this and say, this doesn't happen here. The next president isn't supposed to tell the current one to clean up the violence in the streets and to condemn it. My mother from Central America texted me a little while ago. She says, we see this in Venezuela and Nicaragua. We don't see this here in the United States. And she's got a point. And I know a lot of people watching right now at home are thinking the same thing. And it's just incredible to think that we are no different now in that regard than some of these other countries who struggled with these kinds of transitions. This is what everyone feared, that watches and monitors this closely, that we've all spoken to since the election in November. But this kind of unrest causing a disruption like this.
I want to make sure that we get some live pictures right now about what's happening on Capitol Hill. I know we're showing you some images of people climbing, but let's take some live pictures of what's happening on Capitol Hill right now, the state of the protests. This is live that you see. That doorway right there is, I believe, the doorway on the west front of the Capitol that you see the president and dignitaries come out of.
I think that's right.
Doesn't that seem as my memory?
It's a beautiful door, and when photographers are well positioned there, they get the most magnificent Inauguration Day shots from that vantage point.
Right. So you sense there a mob. There's another live picture right here of people rappelling up the sides of the Capitol, which is sort of unnecessary because there's steps everywhere. It seems
this is the this, I believe, is the north side of the building. This is not the east. No, now we're looking at the west. Forgive me. We've got
the west. We have lots of different feeds coming.
We do. Apologies. This is the west front.
But there's also, at this hour, a heavy law enforcement presence that is arriving on Capitol Hill, as there has been a number of National Guard that have been called up, as well as different state police that have been aided. I want to check in with Ben Tracy, who is at the White House. And Ben, I know you've been following our coverage and doing reporting at the same time. There are now calls from everybody in the Republican Party and even the president-elect for President Trump to step up and speak out. Where is he?
Well, my colleague Wei Zhejiang and I are now being told that we should expect some sort of video message from the president soon. A little while back, we were actually walking through the West Wing. We could see in the Rose Garden they had set up a camera there, which is often a signal that the president is going to record some sort of message. But to the point that you guys have been making, the president could have, in the course of the last hour and a half, 2 hours, simply walked down a very short hallway to the briefing room where there are already cameras and address the nation. He doesn't necessarily have to take questions, but he has decided not to do that. There is no apparent sense of urgency in the West Wing right now, and that is just kind of bizarre. When you walk through there, the few aides that are there, they are huddled in their offices. They are watching this all play out on television. We're told the president has been meeting with his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in the Oval Office and watching this on TV as well in the small office just off to the side of the Oval Office. But we are told that we should expect to see the president on camera in a recorded message that he would likely put out on his Twitter feed.
All right, Ben Tracy, that video has just been tweeted out by the White House. So it's not clear why the president or his advisors don't want him to speak live to the American public, as the president-elect Joe Biden just did. Perhaps it's a concern about the comments that he will make.
It's on his Twitter feed now. It's a video, him standing in the Rose Garden. One relevant quote that's just been told to me through my earpiece is, "You have to go home now." I presume that is a direct reference to the Trump-inspired protesters who have stormed the Capitol in a flagrant act of insurrection. You have to go home now. There'll be more as it plays out, and I'm sure are doing everything to turn it around as rapidly as possible, but it is on the president's Twitter feed, just posted less than 2 minutes ago.
And our control rooms, as well as others, are working to turn that around to show to our audiences now. The president has come out from his Twitter feed and appeared on camera following the president-elect to make these comments at this hour.
Question is, who's going to tell these protesters? They're not looking at their phones necessarily. They're not.
They're in the moment.
You know, they're in the moment. And cell signals up there aren't that great anyway when there's that many people, so it's not like any of them are going to be able to see it.
But you can tell there has been a concerted, pleading effort with the President of the United States to do something.
Yes. His children, his grown adult children, were tweeting about this, saying it needs to stop and to go home. Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, former aides of his, Brad Parscale and Kellyanne Conway, among others. Mick Mulvaney, his former chief of staff, all saying this needs to stop. All of it designed to catch his eye, perhaps, in his own Twitter stream and encourage him to say something. And
bring him to a place of some kind of action, late though it may be. And I noticed, Nora, as social media is an ongoing and continuous conversation, the first retweet of the president's video, someone reminds him of a previous tweet. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. Reminding him of his very own fingerprints on what we are seeing playing out in the United States Capitol.
I don't follow to be honest, I really don't follow the president's tweets that closely, even as a journalist, but that phrase, be wild, had stuck out to me, even when it was tweeted out several weeks ago, because it seemed to be sort of that coded type of message that sometimes the president engages in. Yeah.
Yes, and indulges his supporters in. It's like their code language. Again, I spoke of a zone of permission. This is what a zone of permission from the President of the United States looks like.
Do we have the video?
And let's listen in now to the video from President Trump.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Once again, the president making unsubstantiated claims of a fraudulent election that even his outgoing Attorney General William Barr said was not true, as well as both Republican leaders in the House and the Senate have obviously said it is not true. It was not a fraudulent election. So let's make that clear. The president also saying go home. You know, this really speaks to how detached he is from reality. And the reason is because the president gets to travel by private plane and for 4 years has been able to travel by helicopter. You know, I had people tell me, all these people have traveled on commercial air flights. They're booked in hotel rooms for tonight in the District of Columbia. They're not people of extreme wealth. This is a big outgoing for them. It's their Disneyland of a big event of the year. When people are strapped for cash in an economic time, they've made the decision to spend money and make this their moment. And so just to say go home, it doesn't work that way.
They're going back to their hotels.
They're going to stay here in the District of Columbia and continue the rage that is been fueled within them by rhetoric for months. And that's something that the president has stoked for months. And he continues to in this message by once again noting about a fraudulent election.
It is an arm's length relationship to the reality he has created. That's a fact. The president continues to allow them to nurse these grievances. Again, I repeat, that have had numerous hearings in court, state and federal court. Numerous hearings. Nothing has come of that. The proof never, ever was proffered to make this outrageous and unsubstantiated claim. Yet he repeats it. So the grievance that he told them for weeks, you must come to Washington to do something about, he now says, oh, go home. As if that is the only thing that will tamp down the flames that he has blown the hot breath of his presidency on for weeks. It doesn't work that way. It's better than nothing, but it's closer to nothing than it could have been.
We're watching now what is the west front of the Capitol and the protesters who seem immovable at this point. Jeff Pegues is there and covers the Justice Department and has been covering these protests from day one. Jeff, what do you see from your vantage point?
Well, we just saw Nora tear gas. There was this loud pop, and then we saw this plume of smoke right over my shoulder here, because as you noted, this crowd doesn't seem to be going anywhere at this point. And we have this curfew that will be in effect at 6 o'clock. We also have a larger law enforcement presence. Perhaps you can see that over my shoulder. And you hear the cheers from the crowd because now they seem to be reacting to what law enforcement is doing. So what is happening here is it seems to be building to some sort of, I don't know if confrontation is too strong a word, but some sort of face-off between police, law enforcement, and this crowd that is gathered here. Because over the last several minutes, we've seen some members of the crowd calling for more people to come to help them breach the Capitol. So they aren't backing down. They aren't all going home. Many of them are staying out here, still encouraging people to climb the walls and breach this Capitol. So it'll be interesting to see over the next few minutes, perhaps over the next couple of hours, how law enforcement reacts to this. But for some reason, in the last 10 minutes or so, law enforcement felt the need to release more tear gas. We heard this pop and this plume of smoke.
And Jeff, let me get your take on that, because you cover the law enforcement as a beat. Why is your sense that there's some sort of confrontation brewing?
Well, because at some point, they're going to have to enforce this law. They're going to have to enforce this curfew that the mayor of D.C. has called for. So at some point, they're going to have to clear these people out. And in fact, we've heard some people who've decided to leave because I overheard one couple saying, listen, I don't want to be caught up in this. I get the feeling that they're going to start pushing these people back. And I would agree with that. At some point, law enforcement is going to have to enforce this curfew and enforce this law and try to calm these crowds down. In fact, over the last hour, we have seen law enforcement move into this area. We've heard the sirens. We've seen long lines of police cruisers coming in. And so we've also seen police officers or law enforcement of some sort. It's hard to see because it's some distance away, with gas masks on. And so they are gearing up for something here. You can just see it. You feel it in the air. But you also have the protesters here getting riled up a little bit, still getting rather riled up. And as I said, calling for people to breach the Capitol. They think, some of them at least, think this is some sort of showdown, some sort of revolution. It's sort of odd to watch. They have it in their heads that this is their time to take back their house. That's what we've heard them say.
Is that chanting I hear behind you, Jeff?
There is some chanting. It's hard to make out. There is some chanting. Some of it, you hear them chanting about President Trump and other things that, frankly, we can't broadcast. So there is some chanting as well.
Yeah, we've got a pool feed that's popping around some images that I just want to show people, that you can see the Metro Police. Yes.
DC Fire Department.
This looks like this was earlier. This is the Senate entrance.
And you can see that's the type of police force that we have guarding the entrance. That's the carriage entrance, isn't it? Yes, it's the carriage entrance into the, I used to cover Capitol Hill.
Nice. The United States.
So we'd walk in.
Carriage entrance. But that's where you would see the vice president enter from. Senators, it brings you right up very quickly, and you can see.
Formerly in carriages, now in cars.
That's right.
Hence
and that's
the name.
why it's called the carriage entrance. This is what our law enforcement is trained to do. And they put their lives at risk to try and keep the peace in a circumstance like this.
But if you're one of those wondering what's next or when does this get resolved, one of the things that has to happen, as Jeff was saying, is they're going to push all those people back, but then they're going to have to sweep every room of the Capitol complex before they deem it safe enough to reconvene the House and Senate to finish the work that they're constitutionally obligated to do.
Got it.
And so this could take into the night, into tomorrow potentially even.
To just clear the area.
To just clear the area and secure it so that they can return.
Got it. It is 4:30 here in Washington, and usually the sun sets in just over an hour from now in wintertime, so it is about to get dark here in Washington, D.C., which is, of course, the concern for many law enforcement officials. Parts of the crowds, as Jeff Pegues, have decided to disperse who don't want to be involved in a confrontation. We're getting numbers on the number of law enforcement that are headed to Capitol Hill, a mix of state troopers from Virginia and Maryland, a number of National Guard, we believe, are also on the way that have been approved. We're told this is being coordinated by the U.S. Justice Department, and we're seeing pictures of people with oxygen, law enforcement and others who are being transported from the U.S. Capitol who have been injured. Major, let's return now to the idea about what today was supposed to be. Today was supposed to be, by U.S. code, a day of really very perfunctory kind of ceremonial where the vice president would preside over
a joint session of the House and Senate to open the envelopes certified by each state, signed by the governor of each state, and in this case, a representative from the District of Columbia, providing for Congress and its inspection and its acceptance the electoral votes from those jurisdictions. As you said, pro forma in the past. There has been some objections in the past. I don't want to suggest there haven't ever been objections. What is important about those previous objections, 2001, 2005, 2017, the defeated presidential candidate in those cases did not endorse efforts to contest those and did not seek allies in the House and Senate to bring this to a full-blown crisis, as this president has and as many Republicans have in very large numbers. But the process was to play out. The first state that was contested was Arizona. The debate had just begun shortly after 2 p.m. Eastern. In the middle of the speech from Jim Langford, Republican from Oklahoma in the Senate, who supports challenging the electoral votes from Arizona, the Senate chamber was evacuated, as was the House, because these protesters stormed the Capitol, breached security barriers, and entered in such a way and with such what appeared to be menacing intent that the Capitol Police felt it was incumbent upon them to rapidly remove the Vice President of the United States, the senators, and eventually members of the House.
And here
that's what was supposed to go on. That's what did happen, and it is now in abeyance because of these occupiers of the United States Capitol.
And Ed, you were just noting this window that is being crawled through right now.
Yes, there were protesters there crawling into the Capitol. There we go, right there.
The windows that overlook the west front of the Capitol high up like that and have a balcony are usually leadership offices, am I correct?
If we could, we'd have to have a wider view of this shot to know exactly which window that is. But the fact that they're able to do this at all just shows you the lack of coherent law enforcement response. The fact that there is still
an ability to repel them,
and that there's still a danger to those inside, and that this has not yet been resolved and is nowhere near being resolved.
No. This is a wanton act of vandalism, and you can see that they are sort of exulting in this desecration of the Capitol, waving and extolling the crowd to cheer them on. That's the mindset of those who are doing this occupation. And to Ed's point, and possibly to Jeff Pegues's point, they're on scene for the hardheads who really want to find a way to make this a confrontation that appears to be coming, because you cannot resolve this without pushing these people well off the stairs and out of the Capitol. And that is going to have to be done by force, because it doesn't appear they're willing to leave voluntarily.
And that image that we just showed you was from inside Pelosi's office, where people have breached the Speaker of the House's office. And
don't know which office specifically, whether it's hers or one of her aides, because it's a large complex of offices. But regardless, they got into that area, which should be rather secure.
Right, with a note that says, "We will not back down." We are told law enforcement is on the way. Eva Nordstrom is our director of special events and directing our coverage today. And as we see protesters still throughout the District of Columbia, we now have a statement from Senator Hawley, who, along with Senator Ted Cruz, had been one of these senators who directed this opposition to the counting of the electoral.
Senator Hawley was the very first to say he would endorse and share an objection with a member of the House to bring this debate to fruition.
Yes, he says, "Thank you to the brave law enforcement who put their lives on the line. The violence must end, and those who attacked police and broke the law must be prosecuted, and Congress must get back to work and finish its job." Questions about whether the Senate will courageously return to Congress right now.
Those numbers look larger to me, Nora and Ed, and they begin to look to me as if there is movement to
push back the crowds,
to repel this crowd, to push it back and regain some of the territory, if only bit by bit. But those numbers appear more concentrated and a bit more forceful than they have.
Those are Washington, D.C. police not Capitol Police. So the reinforcements of our MPD there, you see Metropolitan Police Department. Those are the guys that are trained to deal with these large crowds. They train for potential violence across the nation's capital, and they're doing it now here at the Capitol as the unrest continues. We've got banners now hanging off the sides of the Capitol. And these crowds are not going anywhere, at least so far.
Right, and you can see the mask there. Some of this is extravagant, performative revolutionaryism. There is almost a performance art, repellent though it is, quality to this. And let's just articulate the natural extension of what they want. They want to disable the United States Congress from meeting and assembling and conducting its business until they get their way. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the clinical dictionary definition of mob rule. And that's what they're seeking, and that's what their actions represent. There is no other way to describe it.
Let's go now to Jeff Pegues, who is outside the Capitol, just the west front of the Capitol. And Jeff, is it fair to say that one of the concerns is that we're close to sundown?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, because what that suggests is, with what the mayor has imposed, this 6 o'clock curfew, at some point they're going to have to clear these people out. And I think, you know, if you look behind me, you can see some people walking from the Capitol building, but there are many, many more people still there. And looking down on them is this line of law enforcement. But here's the thing. With all these people, and they're, you know, by my estimate, probably about 1,000, couple thousand people perhaps, you really don't have enough law enforcement here to push all these people back and to clear this scene. So I'm still waiting to see if we're going to see more law enforcement showing up here to help calm this situation down, because it's still relatively volatile. You have a crowd here, or people in this group, who are intent on breaching this Capitol building. In fact, you know, I just walked up there a few minutes ago and I heard someone say, "This is civil war." I mean, these are the things that you're hearing in this crowd, and just behind me now, you see another
and Jeff, you know,
plume of smoke. We heard that pop.
And you know, Jeff, I misspoke earlier, but sunset is at 5:01. So you know, wintertime, it comes quite early. So we're just half an hour now from sunset, and you know, it's already a very rowdy and mob-like crowd, and that's one of the concerns. As Jeff Pegues noted, some have gone home, but others are waiting for that confrontation. Jeff, I've been asking all day for a summary of the number of law enforcement that have been called in to help. Do you know what that is?
Well, we don't have exact numbers, but we know that about 300 members of the National Guard were activated for this day here in D.C. And you had, obviously, you had Metro Police Department officers here as well. You have Capitol PD. So there should be a sizable force of law enforcement. But what we've seen is that today, at least, they've been slow to react. I mean, everybody knew going into this day that there would be this march toward the Capitol. Everybody knew that, but for some reason, it just appears that law enforcement today was slow to react to the number of people who descended on Washington for this event. This event that they called the Save America event. And so what you see behind me is the result of that. You had this massive crowd gathering here on the Capitol steps, some people climbing the walls here, and law enforcement seem to be caught flat-footed here, responding to this. So it'll be interesting to see how they get this situation under control.
Jeff Pegues outside the Capitol there. And it's been an extraordinary day, as we've already heard from the president-elect Joe Biden, saying this must end. He called it an assault on the citadel of liberty, the representatives, the public servants, an assault on the rule of law, and an assault on our most sacred institutions of democracy. He said these scenes do not represent all that we are, that they are a small group of extremists. The Republican leader in the House of Representatives on our air, and probably one of the most incredible interviews of our career, sounding emotional, angry, saying he specifically had called President Trump, told him to address the nation, called the president's chief of staff, imploring him to address the nation and call for an end to the violence, suggesting that those words in that short video that the president just released would essentially cause these protesters that have been riled up for months to just go home. It's clear they're not listening. It's clear that they are bearing down at this moment, bearing down for a confrontation with law enforcement. And yes, Ed, you have something to
Forgive me,
add.
they may not have heard the message yet, because they're out there on the grounds of the Capitol, and they may not be looking at their phones. That's why he may have tweeted this and said it, but we don't know that it's actually reaching the people who need to hear it. That was my only point. Forgive me for
And I think we would all agree, Nora, listening as we all had a chance to ask Leader McCarthy numerous questions, I detected a modicum of helplessness in his voice. I don't think he felt he had any real ability to get control of this situation, that this was a whirlwind that he was being pulled into, and all members of the House and Senate had been pulled into in ways that he found unexpected, even though he is the leader of the House Republican Conference and a very close and stalwart ally, as we've said, of President Trump, and very familiar with Mark Meadows, the current White House Chief of Staff, and the entire conversation within the Trumpian world, which he is a regular part of. I detected in his voice, I want this to stop, and I'm not sure it can or I can stop it. I don't know if you heard the same thing, but as I've been listening to it in my head, I heard it.
I did. I detected that same sense of not only sort of a sense of sadness, but a sense of disbelief that it had reached this moment. But President-elect Biden said the words of a president matter, no matter how great or how bad. They can inspire or they can incite. And today they incited. And they incited the crowd and the mob that is at the United States Capitol today. They were incited by Rudy Giuliani, who earlier in the day said, let this be trial by combat. And to this group of fervent supporters of the President of the United States, they took those words and they used them not only as a rallying cry, but as marching orders. And thus have marched to the front steps of the Capitol, the back steps of the Capitol, inside the Capitol, into the floor of where the most important debates of our nation take place, and into the Speaker of the House's office. They are now standing on the very steps and on the podium where President-elect Joe Biden will be sworn into office 2 weeks ago. No matter what happens, Congress will fulfill its ultimate duty as this final step in just doing what is a perfunctory matter and counting these electoral votes. But what we're witnessing now is really a question of leadership, as politicians who, as their profession, use their words to encourage support and action are now unable to pull back what they have created. And those lawmakers who serve on Capitol Hill, who regularly incite through rhetoric different types of passions, have abandoned the citadel of democracy, the U.S. Capitol. They're no longer there. One of the first to leave was the Vice President of the United States.
Well, we don't know whether they've entirely left the Capitol complex itself. In fact, in speaking with some lawmakers, it's members of the Senate are still in and around Capitol Hill itself, but they may not be in the actual building. They're all connected through tunnels and whatnot. Just
meaning in the office buildings that are right near
exactly.
the...
And it's believed that at least members of Congress are still in that proximity. As we near sunset, as you said, about 5:10 tonight.
5:01.
5:01, forgive me, so in 15 minutes or so. Reminder that there's a curfew here in Washington, D.C. starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. Metro bus and Metro rail service is being ended earlier this evening by 8 p.m. Eastern. Our transportation unit passes along that flight attendants who stay in downtown Washington hotels are being cleared out of those downtown hotels by their airlines as a precaution and told to stay close to the airports where they're supposed to fly out of. Some sense of the potential risk tonight in this city as this continues. And as we've seen, there's an increased level of law enforcement there from Washington, D.C., from the National Guard, both of the District of Columbia and Virginia, from Maryland. But we don't know when and how exactly this resolves itself.
And as we talk about our members of Congress, I want to bring in a United States Senator, Senator Tammy Duckworth, a retired Army National Guard Lieutenant Colonel, helicopter pilot, now a distinguished member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Duckworth, thank you for joining us. I know that in all that you have witnessed in your life, that this is unlike anything you've ever seen.
It is unlike anything I've ever seen on domestic soil, that is for sure. You know, I spent my entire adult life defending our Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. It never, ever occurred to me in a million years that that domestic threat would occur on the steps of the U.S. Capitol after being incited by the President of the United States. This is a shameful day, but I will not be deterred from doing my job and certifying these electoral college ballots today.
What are you calling on your colleagues to do in terms of counting those electoral votes?
Well, I'm calling on them to stay here and continue with the proceedings. We are all now located in a safe location in the Capitol. They have collected us from all of the places that we're safely securing ourselves, and it looks like we're going to be able to continue with the proceedings. I have made it clear to my colleagues that I want to continue. The good news is that one of the staff members was very, very quick thinking, and she actually was able to grab and secure the electoral college ballots and bring them with her to this location. So we have them with us, and we will be able to proceed as long as Mitch McConnell calls us back into session.
This is such an important piece of news, Senator Duckworth. The electoral votes are secure. They are secure with the senators who are in a secure place there in the United States Capitol. And what is your understanding from leadership about, so your understanding is everybody wants to get this done tonight?
Well, from the Democratic side, I'm chatting with the Democratic senators. I've not had a chance to sit down and chat with the Republican side. The Democratic senators are on a group chat together, and that has been our consensus as we're chatting back and forth, that we want to continue. I am going to approach some of my Republican colleagues and try to encourage them to agree to move forward and to pressure Senator McConnell into reconvening the Senate so that we can move forward.
And are you just secure with Democratic senators and the Republican senators are secure in a different location?
No, we are all together in one big room, including staff members. And what they're doing right now is they're doing a roll call. They're calling senators' names and finding those who were not on the floor and bringing those senators. They're sending out, for example, myself. I was not on the floor when the breach occurred. I was actually in the tunnels and was told by the Capitol Police not to proceed on the train in the underground tunnels to the floor, to instead go and to barricade myself into a secure location, which is where I was when the floor was evacuated. And just a little while ago, a team of Capitol Police came and retrieved me and brought me to this central location where the other senators are, and they're proceeding to do that with all of the remaining senators and staff members who are scattered about the Capitol who didn't happen to be on the floor when the breach occurred.
Are all of you able to see what's happening outside the Capitol, what we're broadcasting right now?
Yes, we have a couple of channels up, and we have 3 big televisions that are playing the news right now.
Well, Senator Duckworth, you know, what we see, of course, is, as you know, sunset in just about 10 minutes from now. We see a number of the Metro D.C. police. We've been told that additional National Guard have been approved by the Pentagon, by the Secretary of the Army, that Maryland and Virginia are also willing to assist. Do you have any understanding to the senators with you about how they're going to move and disperse this crowd?
Well, we are getting a briefing every 20 minutes or so from the Capitol Police. They're coming in the room and giving us a briefing. My understanding is that they're working on clearing the Capitol right now, and that we are just holding tight. Again, we want to make sure that we've tracked down all the staff members that are here and everybody is secure. I will tell you that coming over here with the team that brought me over, we certainly went past quite a large number of Capitol Police, as well as some uniform National Guard personnel who are already on location. and that we are as safe as we can possibly be where we are at right now. But all that we're seeing on TV right now is just what's being broadcast, which is I think, this video footage from earlier in the day, because it's showing that people are, walking around through the Rotunda and the like, and we're watching Mayor Bowser's briefing, and I think his Secretary of the Army is speaking right now, so we're watching that as well.
Major Garrett is with me, Senator. Thank you for your time, and he has a question as well.
Senator Duckworth, Major Garrett, I know in the Capitol there are two families, the House family and the Senate family. I know you're all one big family today, but are you aware of anyone in the Senate family, member or staff, who was injured in this fracas?
I'm not aware of anyone who was injured. Everybody here seems to be fine and good spirits. We are ready to get going again. I think people are just anxiously awaiting to make sure that everyone indeed is safe and that we can get going. And I think I saw the attending physician was walking around making sure and checking up on everybody as well, both our senators and staff members.
Best case scenario, when do you think the Senate might reconvene? Tonight?
Tonight, definitely. I mean, that is what I would like, and that's what I have expressed to our leadership. It's also what as I said, the Democratic senators are on a group text together, and we expressed that to our caucus for this purposes. I don't know what the Republican senators are saying. I've not seen Senator McConnell to approach him, but I do know that the Democrats want to keep going with the process.
Senator, I must ask you about the culpability of what has led us to this moment. We spoke earlier with the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, urging supporters of the president to go home. He said he'd called the president and asked the president to address the nation, who recorded a short message claiming that the election was fraudulent, and then saying, time to go home now. Where do you place the blame?
The blame for this is Donald Trump. He is the one that has been spreading conspiracy theories, falsehoods. He is the one who is pressuring governors of states like Georgia and secretaries of state of states like Georgia to find him missing votes. He is the one that is rejecting their results of this election, which have been certified by all 50 governors. It is this president who has incited his supporters to this violence. And even as he did just now, spend barely a minute telling people to go home, he continued to spread lies about the election. This is Donald Trump's fault. He is fully responsible for this today, and it is shameful. I would never in my entire adult life, serving both first in the Army and now in the legislative branch, would ever imagine that it is the President of the United States of America who would be the one to incite violence and have people storm the steps of the United States Capitol. Never would I imagine that this could possibly happen. But it did today. But you know what? Democracy will prevail. We will not be deterred by this unruly mob. We will continue to move forward and follow the guidance of our Constitution and make sure that we carry out the will of the American people. And then we need to get to work, and we need to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and get help to working families and fight this pandemic and get our economy moving again. And we can only do that together as partners. But we have to get through tonight first.
Senator Duckworth, stand by. I want to ask our control room as well to put up in a banner that the D.C. mayor is not only ordering, but enforcing a 6 p.m. curfew. Because I think the news plays an important role as well in giving out factual information. And it's our understanding as well that what is being broadcast right now outside the Capitol via megaphone is you will be arrested if you are outside after 6 p.m., that is part of the method that our law enforcement is using now, this hour-long via bullhorn, 6 p.m. curfew, you will be arrested. What have the Capitol Police been telling you, Senator?
They've told us that they are working on carrying the Capitol, and that was the last briefing that we received about 15 minutes ago. that, as far as I know, is that they're working to clear the Capitol at this time.
Senator Duckworth, again, Major Garrett. I know you might not have been briefed on this, but I'm just curious, since we have you, a very good source of mine, very connected on all things Capitol Hill, just texted me and said that the word is that the House is going to go into session, but not in the House chamber, but in the Ways and Means Committee room, which is a very large facility that might, in fact, be large enough for a socially distant reconvening of the House. Have you heard anything along those lines? Would that surprise you?
That would not surprise me. I'm familiar with that House chamber, having served in the House myself, and I urge my House colleagues to please do go back into session. And I hope that will be an indication that Senator McConnell will call us back into session here where we are located. We are in a very large room ourselves, but there is absolutely no room, and there's not much social distancing going on at this point in time. We all have our masks on, of course, but we are pretty tightly gathered together here, but it is the best condition we possibly can, and we are all safe, and we want to continue. So that's good news indeed if the House does go back into session, because I would like the Senate to go back into session as well.
You know, Senator, on that very point, this morning, before tens of thousands, Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump Jr. Were the warm-up acts for the president, and Rudy Giuliani called for trial by combat. The president's son, Don Jr., told congressmen who weren't going to vote to overturn the election, quote unquote, "We're coming for you." How important is it for members of Congress to not act or show that their duty has been delayed or rather stopped because of that rhetoric and the actions of this mob?
I think it is paramount that we continue to move forward with our democratic processes and that we carry out our duties. I think it is very important, not just for our nation and our democracy, but for the world to see that in America, nothing will stop the democratic process from moving forward, and that the will of the people will be carried out, and that we here in the Senate and in the House will not be deterred by mobs.
And I think we'll leave it at that. Senator Duckworth, we thank you so much for your time, for sharing what you know, gathered there with all of the other senators in a secure location, and with the, as Senator Duckworth first reported, with the electoral votes secure. That, in her words, a very smart, quick-thinking staffer said, let's
What's
get
the most important piece of paper in this chamber, or pieces of paper, envelopes? Gather them, secure them, keep your wits about you. I can only say on behalf of the entire American process and democracy, well done. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a sense of what's going on Capitol Hill. I'm seeing this picture on the west front of the Capitol, that doorway, that window. It appears to me, at first when I thought, all right, one of these supporters brought their welding material with them, and maybe they're welding and opening up the doors, you know, with welding material. Then it struck me that perhaps it's the law enforcement from inside the Capitol shining their bright lights out and saying, move back, in a way to begin the disbursement, you know, with lights. I just can't tell. I wonder if someone can shed light on if Jeff Pegues, I know it's a difficult vantage point, but it does appear that those...
They're essentially, in my limited recollection of what law enforcement carries up there, it appears to be either
is it like a strobe flashlight?
A strobe flashlight, either that they carry separate from their weapon, or that might be on some longer weapons up there. And it's just very difficult to tell from this vantage point.
I'm being told they are strobe lights from likely weaponry in order to distract that is being used, so most likely coming from law enforcement.
Right.
So they are
hard to look into that.
Right. Imagine that if you were trying to storm the Capitol through that entryway and law enforcement is shooting back the strobe lights, it is difficult for you to see and move forward. However, you see that group there does not appear to be moved back by it at all.
But this is the kind of difficult situation that's going to have to be deconstructed here in the coming hours, with just 59 minutes until this curfew is set to begin in Washington, with a larger law enforcement presence now on scene, and with members of the House and Senate clamoring to reconvene, even if they don't do it in the House and Senate chambers.
Yeah. And I do want to be precise in my language, because I do believe that I have called this a protest, which I believe earlier in the day, many of these supporters of the president were engaged in a protest. At this point, it is being called a mob or an insurrection. They are inciting violence, and they have been asked by, and it is illegal to be on the Capitol grounds as they are now. Jeff Pegues, I want to bring in now. And Jeff, can you explain what's happening right now with law enforcement?
Slowly but surely, they are moving some of the demonstrators back off the Capitol building. They're not taking fast action, that's for sure. But you have police officers sort of nudging people toward the exits, if you will. Just in a line of police officers, we saw them just slowly moving people toward the exits. And the people that they were trying to get out off that level of the Capitol building, they were complying. And so that is good news, perhaps from a law enforcement perspective, that things didn't escalate there. But behind me, you still see a lot of people just hanging out there. You do hear chants of USA, USA. And so while some people have cleared out, there are still many others gathering here on the steps of this Capitol building, cheering, waiting perhaps also for law enforcement's next move, because as we've noted, the sun is going down. It is getting darker out here, and we see more. That may be tear gas there. That may be tear gas coming from the center of the Capitol building there, where you see just beyond the crowds that have gathered there, you see this yellow plume. It looks like smoke, but we're being told that it is tear gas.
Okay, stand by, Jeff.
Periodically, we're hearing.
Stand by, Jeff. We're going to stay up on that picture. Stand by. Let me know what you can hear. Just want to quickly bring in Catherine Schweitz. She's a former FBI agent who specializes now in mass events. And Catherine, how does law enforcement get a large crowd like this to disperse? And what do those images that we're showing now tell you about what they're trying to do?
Hi, Nora. It is a challenge. As you can hear, even just for Jeff, you can hear that he's breathing in tear gas, and that's why his voice is the way it sounds. The challenge for law enforcement, as darkness is now approaching, because it's sunset right now, is they are going to have to divide and conquer. That's the only way that you can take a large crowd and find a way to disperse it. So the building itself, they have to secure the building perimeter before they can try to empty the building out. And once they secure the perimeter of the building, then they'll be able to send teams into different areas and clear each individual corridor, building, office. And that's when we'll know that the building is secure. But there's also the basement and all the floors above. But for the big crowd outside, you know, a lot of times what happens, and we see in this kind of mob situation, terrorist situation, and people who are inciting riots, is they're all about getting to the site, but they don't really know how to get away from the site. Once they get there, they don't really have a plan. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. It's sunset. They're in a location with no bathroom, no food. It's getting kind of cold. It's going to be down to 30. They've been out all day. And so that will probably take the law enforcement suggestions to disperse.
Catherine, we're seeing the disbursement efforts going on right now. I got to go back to Jeff Pegues, because we hear the sound of a bang and what appears to be either tear gas or something like that. Jeff?
Yeah, we just think, you know, in the last couple of minutes, we're just seeing things escalate a bit here. We have 5, 6, or 7 or so bangs and more smoke. But what is remarkable to me is that we don't see too many in the crowd moving toward the exit. They're just sort of camped out there. No matter what law enforcement does in terms of these flashbangs and tear gas, they're just sort of camped out there. All right, so things have calmed down a little bit. I don't know if law enforcement is going to start another round of these flashbangs.
You can see the law enforcement right on one of the arches of those windows, pushing supporters out, actually.
Yes.
That's what it looks like, saying, get out.
Yeah.
It looks like
and they're crawling out of offices.
Effort.
They're
yes.
crawling out of other offices,
yes.
having already penetrated those rooms by breaking the glass and climbing in. This is a very narrow balcony on the west front, so to get these people off of here, they're going to have to find a staircase to get them to. And you can see people now rubbing their eyes
yes.
and sort of ducking their heads
and
from what is
larger numbers than we've seen before coming out of that central entryway with 2 doors, and you see people withdrawing. It's essentially withdrawing.
Yeah.
Pulling back, quite obviously under threat of arrest and other consequences, and more flashbangs. You can see the chemical irritant, whatever it is. We don't know precisely what it is.
And here comes it. You can see you can hear Jeff say definitely tear gas.
And Jeff, why do you say it's definitely tear gas?
Well, just the color of it, it's this yellow.
Yes.
There's this yellow tint to that smoke.
Correct.
We do have flashbangs mixed in there. I think I got that right. We do have some former law enforcement with us. They're here helping us describe some of the flashes and the bangs that we're seeing. But clearly this is that point that we thought would come, where police are stepping up their efforts to clear the Capitol building. That's what you're seeing right now. And now you see this, it looked like a firecracker, but it's not. It's obviously a flashbang as they try to clear people out.
Jeff Begay, stand by. We're going to continue to monitor this scene. I want to bring in Michael Morell, the former acting director of the CIA and a national security analyst for CBS News. And Mike, thank you. I guess I need to ask you first about, since you have been at the CIA, how our adversaries may be using, looking, watching at these images.
Nora, it's good to talk to you. It's a terrible, terrible day. You know, I think there's 2 things happening overseas. One is what's going through the mind of our adversaries, you know, the Chinese and the Russians and others. And I think they see this as a significant opportunity, right? They'll use it in 2 ways. One is they will show this to their own people, and they will say, this is what democracy brings, so you should actually be happy that we don't live in a democracy. And secondly, they'll share it with the rest of the world with the talking points that this is what the United States is trying to bring the rest of the world when it talks about spreading democracy. So that's an effort to try to reduce our influence. So that's what our adversaries are doing, Nora. What our friends are doing is wondering what is happening. I received a text earlier today from a foreign ambassador to the United States who is back in his capital, and he said he was sitting with his leader trying to explain what was happening here, and he was at a loss for words. He couldn't do it. So I think there's effects here on both our adversaries and on our allies and partners.
Do you believe this effort may have been aided by our adversaries?
I don't think so, Nora. I think this was, you know, made and created here in the United States. You know, we do know that the Russians did not play significantly in the 2020 election, nowhere near as much as they did in 2016. So, no, I'm afraid we own this one ourselves.
Michael, it's Ed O'Keefe. Good to talk to you, although under these weird circumstances. I'm curious, you served 2 presidents and would have been involved in all sorts of hypothetical exercises, tabletop exercises they call them. Was there ever anything like this gamed out or prepared for?
No, Ed, that's a really good question. And of all the scenarios where we talked about risks to the United States and risks to our democracy and risks to our country, you know, this was never on the list. You know, we never anticipated anything like this. So, no, simply not thought about.
And how does this concern you regarding all the other potential vulnerabilities that the country faces right now as we near January 20th. We know there's been concern about, for example, a potential response from Iran after the killing of General Soleimani a year ago, possibly some other kind of event or incident. There's the ongoing cybersecurity breach by Russia that national intelligence agencies have said was caused by them. Is there any reason to believe that, you know, and then there's the pandemic. I mean, is there any other concern that now some other foreign adversary could try to take full advantage of this and cause even more harm?
Yeah, a great question, Ed. I don't think so. The Iranians, for example, they are keeping their head down, right? They are trying to get to a Biden administration without any trouble between them and the United States, right? They want a nuclear deal again with the United States. So I think they're trying to avoid conflict. So I don't think we're going to see anybody try to take advantage of this in the short term. In terms of how I would rank the risks, you know, what's happening today in our own country is at the top of the list, right? If we can't have a healthy democracy, if we can't have a strong democracy, then pretty much nothing else is possible, right? Good policy is not possible. Good foreign policy is not possible. Good national security policy is not possible. You know, your strength as a nation, your national security starts with a strong political system, and we are seeing today that is challenged significantly here in the United States.
No doubt challenged, and at the same time, Michael, you would acknowledge that under threat from foreign governments, multiple foreign adversaries, we did have what was a safe and secure presidential election by all accounts, except by the president, who continues to argue that it was rigged. I have a question for you as someone who, you know, spent a career at the CIA, about the power of words and at the power of messaging, because Leader McCarthy, the top Republican leader in the House, said to us he almost sounded desperate that he had called the president and said he needed to come out and speak before the American people. When the president did address in a taped recording, not live, he once again said that the election had been fraudulent. And then he said essentially to what we may now call a mob, they're no longer protesters, he said at the end, "I love you."
Right.
And I just wonder your take on that, about denouncing, because he had also told them to come and be wild. And I hope that's not too philosophical of a question, but the power of words.
So it's a great question, Nora. You know, in my experience, you know, I worked at the agency for 33 years, and there were dozens and dozens of these kinds of situations that I watched in other countries, where mobs of people rose up to try to turn over a legitimately decided election, right? They wanted to overturn the order. I saw it over and over and over and over again. And one of the necessary conditions for that to happen is for a powerful figure to be saying things that motivate those people who are rioting, right, who are trying to overturn that order. It takes somebody to motivate them, and that's what we have seen with the president.
Michael, if I could, this is Major Garrett. Understanding that you were not participants in any kind of tabletop exercise to game out a scenario like this, but it is nevertheless happening. It is unfolding before our very eyes. You have sat at tables where enormously important and consequential strategies and decisions were made. Honestly, what do you believe are the operational options for the Capitol Police, the National Guard, and those who are trying to clear the Capitol? And what do you think the next 2 or 3 hours ought to look like, and what do you fear they might look like?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Major. You know, I do think that they need to be dispersed. They need to be separated, right? In my experience watching these things overseas, as long as groups of people stay together, they stay strong, right? They stay resolute. It's when they break into very small groups and break into single individuals that they lose that power and they lose that determination. So I think breaking them up is of extreme importance, and keeping them from forming someplace else as a group has to be a top priority.
And final question, Michael. All of this against the backdrop of that extraordinary joint statement in an op-ed by the 10 former secretaries of defense, an effort that was encouraged by former Defense Secretary and Vice President Dick Cheney, that the military would not get involved. I'm sure you have some insight, as do I, based on my own reporting, but it was as if they foreshadowed this type of situation, the concern that this type of insurrection may occur, and to make clear to lawmakers, to the president, and also to the Pentagon that the military would not be engaged. What's your sense?
So when I first saw what was happening at the Capitol today, the first thought I had was these protesters, these rioters, right, this mob, they wanted to create violence in the hope that the president would invoke the Insurrection Act, right, and ask the United States military to come out onto the streets. And I think that's what those former Secretary of Defenses were worried about, is the invoking of that Insurrection Act. And, you know, my understanding, based on the people I talked to, is that the acting Secretary of Defense is a person who could not be counted on to do the right thing in that moment. But the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, was somebody who could be counted on to do the right thing.
Agreed. And it was said to me, though, however, that while all of them trusted Chairman Milley, that under Secretary Esper, when the president had previously tried to use active duty troops, he was able to slow roll that effort. But that, in your words as well, Michael, with this acting secretary, that would be much more difficult. And then in some ways, it's the civilian leadership that ultimately makes the decision about deploying active duty troops. And as you point out, they were all trying to prevent what would really be a worst case scenario. Yep. Michael, we're always so glad to have you. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome, Nora. Thank you.
Thank you. To let everyone know, it is now 5:18 here in the nation's capital, and the sun has set, and the protesters remain. More than 4 hours we've been live on the air covering what is now a mob on Capitol Hill that has forced a lockdown. The House and Senate to go out of session after a joint session was moving forward with the counting of the electoral votes, which was the final step to in the process of naming President-elect Joe Biden as the President of the United States. We don't use the word certify because the states certify the votes, and it's already been certified. So we're very clear and precise in our language here by saying that Congress doesn't certify. It has a very ceremonial role historically. It just counts it, and the Vice President played the role of presider, not decider, and as some have suggested, was almost like the person at the Oscars who just reads the results. As a result of this mob descending on the Capitol after being incited by the President of the United States, his son, and Rudy Giuliani, this has led to this extraordinarily historic, and historic, it sounds like a positive word, but I don't mean that, because we've just never witnessed anything like this in our life, where these supporters of the president have felt emboldened enough to carry this out and place the lives of our D.C. Capitol Police and law enforcement in danger, to place the lives of lawmakers in danger, to place the lives of public servants who engage in the daily act of legislating in danger. We were told by Senator Tammy Duckworth that a number of the senators are all together in a safe and secure location, that a smart and quick-acting staffer grabbed these beautiful wooden boxes that contain the electoral votes and brought them safely and securely to, this is them. Look at this incredible piece of history.
Senator
Look at
Murphy
these boxes
of Oregon they're all in there essentially.
With the senators, they're secure. The electoral votes are secure. The outcome of this presidential election will not be changed. The vice president, who was implored by President Donald Trump to, in his words, be courageous and change it, said, I'm not going to do that. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who has carried out the will of this president in almost every way, today said, we're not going down the death spiral of changing what is a duly elected President of the United States. There was not the widespread type of fraud that would change the results of this election. It was an extraordinary rebuke by Republican leader Mitch McConnell, not only of the President of the United States, but of some of his own Senate colleagues, including Ted Cruz, including Senator Hawley, and others who said, let's go ahead and challenge this. And had those senators, those 13 senators and more than 100 House members not done this, and challenged and objected to the count of these electoral votes, this would have been the ceremonial, usually 20-minute process, and all would be said and done. And yet at this hour, we have what some would call an embarrassing scene for American democracy. What President-elect Joe Biden has said is an attack on the citadel of democracy, an attack on the institution of democracy. And yet, our law enforcement now doing their very best job with bullhorns and tear gas to disperse this crowd, because as Senator Duckworth told us, her and her colleagues and some of the senators I know that Ed O'Keefe has spoken with amongst his sources, they want to continue tonight.
They do.
Yeah,
tell us what you're hearing.
There are several members of the House are back in their offices across the street from the Capitol. Members of the Senate are all together and are waiting to sort of figure out where and when and how exactly they might reconvene. The official word so far is that they don't want to allow them back into the House and Senate chambers until some kind of a major security sweep can occur, not only inside the building, but that they know that outside the crowd has been controlled. And we therefore await some sense of when exactly they could do this. Of course, Major, there's nothing saying they have to do this in the House and Senate chambers. They could decide, and we heard from Senator Duckworth earlier, that they might opt to hold this meeting in some other kind of a conference room. There are very large spaces in the Capitol Visitor Center where they could potentially do this, and there are other large committee rooms as well.
Ed, let me interrupt you for just a second. We have Representative Mike Gallagher on the phone. Congressman, can you hear me, please?
I hear you loud and clear.
This Major Garrett, I'd like you to tell me what you think of today, what you believe will be happening in the next 2 hours, and do you believe the House will reconvene to get back to business in chambers or in the Ways and Means Committee room later on this evening?
I mean, this was absolute insanity. I mean, this was Banana Republic territory, and it's unacceptable. And I think I've opposed the objection from the start on constitutional grounds, but I think the fundamental problem that no one wanted to say out loud is that the objectors thought that they could have a debate, raise awareness to voter, fraud issues or voting irregularities, but because they wouldn't actually achieve their objective, they all knew that they had no chance of actually overturning the election, but they could have it both ways. But the problem is they gave a lot of people false hope, and they got a lot of people fired up, and now we're seeing the consequences of that play out. And this is just absolutely unacceptable. The president needs to call it off. These people need to stand down. I mean, this is America. This is the United States Capitol, and we're sitting here with our walls barricaded, our doors barricaded. Someone was shot at the U.S. Capitol. The closest thing that I can think of that this reminds me of is the time I spent in Iraq in 2007 and 2008.
Is insurrection too strong a word, Congressman?
The problem is it's like everyone's in a rush to label everyone else a traitor. I just want this to stop, and we have to support the peaceful transition of power. I mean, that's it. We have to accept the fact that the election's over. And the more we traffic in the idea that somehow Congress is going to overturn the results of the election, the more we incite dangerous things like this. And that's just unacceptable. So it's over. I wish Republicans had won. It sucks. I get it. But, there are consequences to going down this road.
Congressman Gallagher, it's Ed O'Keefe of CBS News. Thank you again for joining us. As you said, you're not one of those objecting to the results of the Electoral College. You were among the Republicans who reluctantly accept these results and want to move on. I know you made a fair point about not ascribing titles and blame and whatnot, but it does seem like your party especially, and your House conference most of all, is going to have a serious conversation with itself about what it has allowed to occur today. And I just wonder whether you think that conversation will happen, could happen, and what might transpire.
Well, the conversation is going to happen in the next few hours. And the objectors are going to have to ask themselves whether they seriously want to persist in their objections after what they've seen today. And again, knowing that what they're doing has no chance of being successful, that it is all a stunt. I mean, that's a pretty cynical ploy right there. So at a minimum, when we get back together at a conference, I think we all have to say we're not going to persist in the objection. We support the peaceful transfer of power, and we're done perpetuating this fiction that somehow Congress has the authority to overturn the results of the states.
Congressman, to what degree have you been communicated with by leadership about what will happen tonight? Will you reconvene? I've been told that it's possible that the House may reconvene, not in the chamber itself, but in the Ways and Means Committee room.
If that message came down, I missed it. I haven't gotten that. So, you know, I've heard nothing formally from leadership right now. I would imagine they're trying to figure it out. And all the focus right now is just on making sure this thing doesn't escalate any further, making sure that the, now violent protesters disband, abide by the curfew. But I have not heard anything about when we're going to reconvene.
Do you believe it's necessary for Congress to send a message that it get back to business as soon as possible?
Yes, 100%. I think it's necessary for Congress to send the message that we support the peaceful transition of power and that we, as the federal government, don't have the right to overturn the will of the states and, by extension, the American people. That is sort of Schoolhouse Rock Constitution 101.
Congressman Mike Gallagher, we thank you so very much for joining us. Chip Reed, I believe, is near Capitol Hill and has some new information to share with us. Chip?
Yeah, I'm just on Constitution Avenue, just outside the Senate. Two things here. Number one, there were a group of about 20 media with cameras at the Senate swamp site, which you are certainly well familiar with, just out at the bottom of the Senate steps. And out of nowhere, we were suddenly surrounded by about 40 or 50 protesters who started chanting things that I can't repeat about the media on TV. They started throwing bottles. They started pushing people. They picked up the metal fences that we were surrounded by and throwing them at us. And we, for our own safety, evacuated the area, but we did stay long enough to get some pretty good video of them smashing the equipment, cameras, sound equipment, everything they could get their hands on. They just completely took over that spot as they shouted USA, USA, and God bless America. Now I'm just across the street at the Russell Senate Office Building, and I just saw a column of, I would estimate, between 120 and 150 police officers. And by the way, the Capitol grounds is now completely surrounded by police, and there are helicopters above. And I saw this column of 120, 150 police officers walking three abreast, all of them in helmets and flak jackets, walking down Constitution Avenue and turned in the direction of the Capitol grounds. You know, there is a 6 o'clock curfew in Washington. They may be timing some kind of move, this might suggest that, to start clearing the Capitol grounds of these protesters in time for that, or sometime in the vicinity of that 6 o'clock curfew.
Chip, I must ask you, were you injured at all in this fracas? Were any of our colleagues injured? And where were the police? Where were the police? Did you have any sense that you could or would be protected?
There were no police around us. We were on our own. In fact, I remember one of the protesters standing next to me said, the police don't care about you guys. They're only protecting the senators. You're on your own, buddy. And so we hightailed it out of there. They were absolutely ferociously angry at the media, I must say, picking out some of the media enterprises by name. And it was a scary moment, I've got to say. You know, I had a flak jacket and a helmet with me. The last time I wore a flak jacket and a helmet, well, a whole series of times, was when I spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it is so disturbing to have to wear a helmet and a flak jacket on the grounds of the United States Capitol.
Heartbreaking.
And to hear you say that, Chip, I know as someone who's worked on Capitol Hill for many years, it's sad to see this happening at this hour, to have to be wearing a flak jacket and a helmet. Not only anywhere in the United States of America, but on near our United States Capitol. And that's what's happening at this hour. You have law enforcement descending on the U.S. Capitol to try and disperse this crowd from the Capitol. It is nightfall now here in Washington, D.C. The mayor of the District of Columbia, Mayor Muriel Bowser, has ordered a citywide 6 p.m. curfew. It's my understanding that it has been communicated to protesters that that curfew will be enforced by arrest. It appears they have already used tear gas and other materials. I want to bring in Jeff Pegues, who is right there on the scene. And Jeff, has that messaging had any effect?
Slowly but surely, I think it is having an effect out here, Nora. We see a line of police officers in the rotunda here pushing the crowd of protesters back. And in fact, if you look here to my left, you will see that more of the protesters are streaming from this area, which suggests that police are being more successful in their efforts to clear this Capitol area. Now that the sun has gone down, nightfall has come, and that curfew that you mentioned is fast approaching. So their efforts are paying off a little bit more. We see that there are stragglers there waving their American flag, sometimes chanting USA, USA. But certainly law enforcement, as you noted, has picked up the pace in terms of getting this area cleared.